Hello, everybody. I want to thank everybody for tuning in on today's Farsight Spotlight. This is where we give you the latest and the greatest every week. And every Sunday at 11 o'clock Eastern Time, which is about midnight on UTC time. All right, so we're going to be talking about two things today, but they're all combined, so it's going to be one solid thing. And I don't think we're going to have a Wednesday thing. I think we're going to just do the whole thing on Sunday, and that's because I'll explain why. I have to be talking about two things today. The first is I have to talk about the war, and then I have to also talk about why it's related to my age and health. So I'm talking today about my age and health, but connecting it to the war. So why is that? Why in the world would the war and my age and health be connected? Well, you see, there's a high probability that this is going to be the last possible day I can talk about such a mundane topic as my age and health. I don't think there's a high probability that I simply won't be able to talk about it for the rest of the year because too much else is going to be going on. The reason is that I'm talking probabilistically now, okay? Probabilistically. America's Great War. I'm not talking World War I or World War II. I'm talking the big war. Its highest probability of starting is tomorrow. All right? Today is Sunday, and it's the 19th of January, 2025, and the highest probability of the Great War, America's Great War, is tomorrow, January 20th, Monday. Now, this is a probabilistic thing, so let me give you the reasons for that. But if the war does start tomorrow, which is a high probability, then I just can't talk about my age and health anymore. So let me go through the reasons for why it is most probable, not certain, that America's next great war, the big one, starts tomorrow. Okay, now just hang in there with me, all right, everybody? I know you're sort of saying, just hang in there, okay? During the last few years, during the Biden and Harris administration, Joe Biden was mentally compromised, and Kamala Harris was assigned to be the border czar, and it didn't work. For all practical purposes, there was a complete open border policy over the last few years. Approximately 10 million people came across the border. They were whatever you want to call them, illegals, undocumented aliens, whatever you want to call them, but they walked across the border and they entered the United States. There was absolutely no vetting process. There was no application process, nothing. They just walked across and there it was. Anyone could get in. And approximately about 10 million people, maybe more, people sort of lost count, but at least about 10 million people got in. The border police were often essentially travel agents, and they were arranging transportation for the people coming across to get to any city in the United States. And lots of people went by air travel. So, paid for by the U.S., I guess. Well, during that time period, there was absolutely nothing to stop America's enemies from sending their own people to prepare for an attack within the United States. Now, I can prove this. It's not just that I'm just talking off the top of my head. I can prove that America's enemies sent their people into the United States to attack the United States from within. I can prove it. Absolutely. Here, you want the proof? Okay, you're going to want the proof, right? Here's the proof. If you were the intelligence or security chiefs of Hamas, Hezbollah, or Iran, if you were the intelligence chiefs of Hamas, Hezbollah, or Iran, or even Russia, but just focus now on Hezbollah, Hamas, and Iran. Would you have done this? would you have sent your people into the United States when the floodgates were open and 10 million people walked across the border? Would you have put your people in that group of 10 million people so that they would be ready to attack the United States from within? Would you have done it? Obviously, the answer is yes. Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran, their security chiefs are not stupid. So, and Iran security people, their security chief and their entire Department of Security, they're really quite good. They're maybe not as good as the U.S., but they're good. They're really good. And they're not stupid. So obviously they did this. If you would have done it, then they did it. If I was head of security of Hamas, Hezbollah, or Iran, I definitely would have put the people, my own people, in those 10 million people and just got them into the country. So it's obvious that they did this because you would have done it. So that's the proof. And all you have to say is the head of security and intelligence for Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran are not stupid, so that's the proof all you need. Because anybody could get in. And the drug cartels did the same thing, but for their own reason. A lot of drug cartel people came in. Why? Because they could do it, and they wouldn't. They're not stupid. They're obviously going to do it if they could do it. I mean, it's too much of a golden opportunity. So it was very easy to hide any number of terrorists or drug cartel people, but let's just focus on the terrorists. It was very easy to hide any number of terrorists within the incoming population of 10 million. I don't know how many would have done this, but 10,000 people would have been a piece of cake. It would have been within 10 million people. You can get in a few thousand people. 10,000 people would have been nothing to hide, just to let them come in. They would have been easy to get in. They could have gotten in 20,000. They could have gotten in 500, 10,000, 20,000. When you have 10 million people walking across the border, your enemies can send in basically as many as they want. Now, let's talk about weapons. Now, let's not talk about guns like those guns. Let's talk about heavy weapons. Okay, but Courtney, so maybe they could have gotten people in, but they couldn't have got the weapons in, right? No. The U.S. enemies were also able to import heavy weapons as well. So let me give you proof of this as also, okay? The proof is how drugs are transported. The quantity of illegal drugs that are distributed within the United States, that can only be done with large vehicles, such as 18-wheelers and large campers. So if the drugs can get in, well, then the heavy weapons can get in as well. So weapons, let's talk about the weapons again. How can I prove to you that the heavy weapons got in? And I'm talking major weapons like rocket launchers and everything, the whole the whole thing, cruise missiles, anything you want. Well, here's the proof. Here's the proof. The U.S. enemies were able to import heavy weapons as well. And it's because it follows the same logic as the drugs. The quantity of illegal drugs distributed within the United States, that can only be done with large vehicles, such as 18-wheelers and campers. Campers. So if the drugs can get in, the heavy weapons can get in. And they come in through the Canadian border. They can get in through the southern border, Mexican-American border. They can get in. Now, I want to give you a personal story that's true. My son, Aziz, a few years back, he decided to roam the country in a camper. So he bought a camper, a big camper, a Mallard. It was a big camper, and he had a nice car that could tow a Mallard, and he traveled around the country, and he went to all sorts of places, and he was having so much fun talking to the people at the campgrounds. A lot of the people in those camper countries in that camper country areas were Trump people. And he had so much fun talking to them and sort of finding out, their point of view on certain things. And he went through, all the Midwest, the West, and He had a great time. But then he decided to pick up Japanese classes in Japan. So he had a camper. He had to get rid of the camper. So he picked in, I think it was Palm Springs, he picked the best place that you could get to store a camper. His car, he had a big car and a camper, a big camper. So he stored it, and he was off to Japan and studying Japanese language. And then sometime during that time, it was maybe a month or a month and a half later, I got a phone call from the camper place where his camper was stored and said, "Are you Courtney Brown?" And I said, "Yes, I'm Courtney Brown. That's me." And, well, your son's camper, did he take that camper? Did he move it away off the lot? And I said, "No, he's in Japan right now. We're trusting on you just doing it." And he said, "Well, it's not here right now. It's gone." Well, okay, long story short, it turned out that it was stolen, and my son had to long distance with telephone calls between Japan and California, had to deal with the police report, insurance, the whole thing. And through all the conversations that he had, he got the information of what actually happened. The drug cartels have everything. Now, they didn't break into the camper place. They have cartel people do it. They were able to get the locks undone. They got in the middle of the night, and they had everything done, and they stole the camper and they stole the car. They ran the car until it ran out of gas, but they took the camper for good. All right. Now, my son then asked the police, because he was dealing with the police a lot, "Why did they break into the place to take my camper?" And the police said, "Oh, that was easy. We know why that happens. It was a big camper. You had a nice big camper, and they need that. They don't need the car. They need the camper." I said, "Well, what?" And they said it was the drug cartels. And he said, "Well, what do you mean the drug cartels? Why would the drug cartels want my camper?" Because they said, "Well, you see, an 18-wheeler can be stopped when transporting drugs across the country. They do inspections and stuff like that. But do you have an old ma and pa driving a camper across the country? The police are never going to stop that. They don't stop campers with a retired couple driving across the country. So they're just going to hook the camper up to some other vehicle and have some old people, mom and dad, retired people, just drive it across the country. And the camper was really large, so it's going to contain all types of. They'll put all the drugs that they want to in there. Okay, so the point is that the drug cartels, as well as the terrorists, have access to these vehicle ways to get things in. Through the Canadian border, through the Mexican border, they have ways to do it. I mean, they can put all types of missiles and everything inside an 18-wheeler and then cover it with all types of other imported type of stuff, and the people do an inspection at the border, and they just drive those things in. The proof is, if you can get the quantity of drugs that they do into the United States, then obviously you can get anything else in through those same borders. That's the only proof you need. So if a determined person who has the resources wants to get heavy weapons into the United States, no problem. And the intelligence people for Hezbollah, Hamas, and Iran certainly have that level of resources. So that's the only proof that you need. The proof first is that they were able to get their people in. Obvious, because they're not stupid. They would be able to do it because we had a completely open border policy. And secondly, they could get the weapons in as well. Why? Well, they can get the drugs in, so obviously they can get the weapons in. So the only assumption that the U.S. intelligence services would be making at this point is that both the terrorists and the weapons are in the United States. Now, we have actually had remote viewing projects dealing with this type of disruption, and we've been publishing that stuff. And we actually had one of our ET board meetings where we told you that the drones were going to start. Now, the drones are actually a mixture. Many of the drones are clearly ET ships. But many of the other drones are almost certainly American drones using ET tech gotten from their, the spacecraft crash retrieval program that they have a lot of tech. And so, that's the only way these drones can stay up in the air for like 7-8 hours. And they have time-lapse photography, having them coming in all over the place. They're searching for something, obviously, and what they're obviously searching for is most likely weapons, because that's what you can pick up from the air. They're doing everything they can to probably stop this. This thing started in earnest after we started publishing all of our stuff. And the likelihood that they're doing absolutely everything else to stop attacks from within is 100%. And the likelihood that the attacks are being planned is also 100%. So the real question is who's going to be successful at stopping this. Now, if this was just sort of a run-of-the-mill terrorist, I'd say, well, it can be anybody. Maybe they'll succeed, maybe they won't succeed. But you're talking about really clever intelligence people from Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas. And they're not likely going to be easily defeated. They know that people are going to be looking for them. They're going to hide this stuff. And so there's a very high probability that the weapons are here in the United States. The terrorists are here in large numbers all over the country in the United States. And if you don't think that's the case, why? You tell me why. Why would that not be the case? All right, now I want to talk to help you connect the dots with some policy stuff that's coming out of Donald Trump. Now, he is not yet president. He'll be president tomorrow, but he is absolutely going to be a very strong president because he's a disruptor. That's a technical term. You can Google it. Elon Musk is a disruptor. Steve Jobs was a disruptor. Jeff Bezos is a disruptor. Bill Gates is a disruptor. Sam Altman is a disruptor. People who go into something and then do things entirely different so the entire environment has to change and readapt, that's a disruptor. Okay? So Donald Trump is clearly a disruptor. When he was first president of the United States back in 2016, he was, not expecting to win the election, and he had not spent hardly any time in Washington, D.C., and didn't know how to be president. So it took him a while to sort of get anything together, and a lot of the people that he had in working for him in his administration, he didn't really like very much. This time is different. He had also 4 years between the last administration and this administration to clean house, to get all new people. And he's got people now that are coming in that are equally disruptors. And they're also competent disruptors. For example, Bobby Kennedy Jr., he's a classic disruptor, and he's also really competent. He's really, really smart. And he has won some of the absolute toughest court cases that nobody else could have won against the polluters along the Hudson River. If there's any one single person that's responsible for cleaning up the entire Hudson River, the single most person responsible is Bobby Kennedy Jr. And those court cases simply could not. He had to talk against the lawyers of all the major corporate polluters, and he won. He's not a pushover. The media has often treated him like he's just a nut, but anyone who knows him knows he's not a nut. He really is an extremely competent person. Elon Musk, Elon Musk has a lot of funny things he does, but no one can argue he's extremely competent. So within the Trump administration second time around, it's going to be much more competent than it was the first time around, and it's probably going to be much more competent in getting things done, whatever those things are that's going to happen, than has happened over the last 4 years. So it's, whether you agree with his policies or disagree with his policies, the chances of him actually succeeding with his policies and doing like major things is very high. Because he's a disruptor. He knows how to do things, and he's bringing things in. He's bringing people in that are equally disruptors and who have a track record for succeeding in these types of things. So now, America's enemies know this. That's what I'm trying to put out to you. America's enemies know this. Now, what's supposed to happen over the next week, like starting the day after the inauguration, is immigration raids. Now, the major media positions it as, oh, he's going to be so mean, he's going to go after people who are just looking for a better life. The initial immigration raids are most probably, they could incorporate all types of people, but most probably they're going to go after the people who are involved with the drug cartels and the terrorists. They're going to try to round up people who are the most dangerous first. So America's enemies know this, and they know that there's a high probability that it might be effective. So America's enemies have a short window where they can get this stuff done. The most probable moment to inflict the largest amount of damage to the United States is on Inauguration Day, before Donald Trump has a chance to get any of his people actually in power so they can do stuff, and before he actually gets his feet on the ground. So it is most likely whatever is going to happen soon. And it's most likely it's going to include attempts, hopefully unsuccessful, but attempts at assassination. But it's also likely going to include attacks in other cities around the United States. The enemies are not going to put all their eggs in the one basket of trying to kill Donald Trump. They're going to try to inflict damage. So in case they don't succeed in assassinating Donald Trump, they want to at least have, cause so much disruption that America is disabled in some way, shape, or form, and it would take Trump sort of months to sort of come back and recover. So it's likely it's going to be widespread across the United States, and there probably will be assassination attempts. So one of the things that I want to explain, that this is the way Donald Trump is thinking, but he's obviously not able to talk about this openly, because the last thing you want to say is to announce to the entire world that, the most probable time to have assassination attempts is on a certain day. You don't want to do that. You don't want to ever talk about that publicly. So you want to sort of hide that, keep that. But behind the scenes, that must be what they're thinking about. And I guarantee you this, the U.S. intelligence services really are the best on the planet. And the Secret Service now that Donald Trump has working for him are really trying their absolute best to sort of keep things under control. But you've had 4 years now where the enemies could prepare for this moment. And it's a real question, can the intelligence services and the Secret Service do that when the enemies have had so much time to get people and resources and preparations in place? So to give you an idea, to give you evidence that indeed Donald Trump is thinking along these lines, think of the following. Let's think of the Panama Canal. Right now, if you want to understand Donald Trump's primary thinking, you're hearing from the media, oh, this is crazy stuff. He wants to control the Panama Canal, and he wants Greenland, and he wants Canada. He wants Canada to be the 51st state. This is just crazy disruptor stuff. Okay, you have to understand his point of view. It's not what you're being presented in the media, in the major media. Let me go through the real reasons why Donald Trump is talking about all of that. When he talks about Panama, he's not talking about Panama's being unfair with unreasonable charges to go through the Panama Canal. That's what he says, but what he's really talking about is security. You see, the U.S. borders on both the south, the Mexican border, as well as the north, the Canadian border, they're simply too long. You can't police them. They're just too long. They're really, really long. You just can't do them. You can talk about putting up a wall, but it's just too long. So all of the people that are coming by either vehicle traffic or by foot from all of South America have to go through the Panama Canal. They have to walk through the Panama Canal, or the drive, but they have to get across the Panama Canal. The Panama Canal is a really narrow spot. And the United States used to own it. it's really easy for the United States to control whoever crosses the Panama Canal, whoever crosses from one side to the next en route to get to Mexico and to the U.S. border. It's really hard to police the entire southern border. That's why Donald Trump really wants Panama Canal again, because Panama is not stopping the flow of traffic from all of South America, the drug cartels and everything, right into the United States. So when they get past Panama, they just go right into Mexico and somewhere along the southern border. He can't stop that. So the canal is just much shorter, and it's just easier to stop people from getting across. The Canadian border, similarly, it's just too long, but there's no choke point. There's no choke point where you can stop people from coming in through the Canadian border. So it's not the same. With the southern border, it's easy to the choke point is the Panama Canal, but in the north, there's no way to do that, and it cannot be policed. You're not going to build a wall across the entire northern part of the United States to separate the United States and Canada. So if Canada is a state of the United States, that's the only way you can stop the inflow of people and equipment that are getting into Canada. So once they get into Canada, they can get into the United States, both people and equipment. So you can be certain that Donald Trump is taking the idea of retaking the Panama Canal and making Canada the 51st state a real thing. He's really talking about that. And it's unclear whether the Canadians would actually go for it. They might actually go for it. There's a carrot and a stick thing. You can increase tariffs so that their economy starts to sink. They can't import things. And you can also lure it by saying, hey, Canadians, there's 40 some odd million of you. Wouldn't you love to be able to travel down to Arizona and have a vacation house down in Arizona rather than being cold all the time up there in Canada? The summers are okay, but the rest of the time is really cold. A lot of Canadians might really go for that. In addition, their taxes would be much lower. So he might use a carrot and a stick approach to getting Canada to agree. And ultimately, they'd have to have some type of major referendum or something like that. But you can probably assume that Donald Trump's not going to be half-hearted in trying to get Canada as the 51st state. And the reason he's not talking about, the reason is security. You got to be able to stop people from getting into the United States that shouldn't be getting in. You got to be able to stop terrorists. You got to be able to stop people that are just coming in with weapons and other things. The Canadian border is just so huge. You just simply cannot police it. So again, it's easier to stop people from getting in if Canada is a state and Panama Canal is owned by the United States again, than it is to get people out of the United States once they're in. So now you have, just from recent years, 10 million new people that are in, and we don't know who they are, what they're doing. And it's really hard to actually find them and get them gone. So the terrorists, the enemies of the United States, they're going to be doing their absolute best to hide until it happens that they can do their stuff. And the time period that's most likely going to be for them to do their stuff is going to be before Donald Trump has a chance to get all of his people actually working. Even waiting 1 week or 2 weeks is giving Donald Trump a lot of time to get his people into place and actually start things going. So it's most likely, in probabilistic terms, January 20th on Inauguration Day is when it will most likely happen. But, I have to also say the remote viewing stuff that we have done with Deep News with assassination attempts on Donald Trump. All of our remote viewers under totally blind conditions, all found what looks like mid-January as the time for the first major assassination attempt against Donald Trump. All 4 of them. And mind you, they found that spot under totally blind conditions. They didn't know what the target was, but all they know was to find Focus 1, and Focus 1 was the first assassination attempt. And every single one of them picked January. And it looked like in the scale that they were doing, it was about mid-January. That's 4 different people all getting the same thing. These are highly trained people. So from a logic perspective, it's certain from my perspective that the enemies of the United States would be trying to do it around that date, and Inauguration Day is the most high visibility, great impact day for them to try. So it may be that it won't happen. It may be that the inauguration will go without a hitch and that then nothing will happen. But if that is the case, it's not because I was wrong. It's because the American intelligence agencies were able to stop it. But it's certain that the enemies would be trying to do it, and there's never going to be a better day than that day. So it's really, behind the scenes, a big war going on between the intelligence services and the enemies of the United States that are now inside the United States. So we'll have to wait and see who wins. If you see stuff happening on January 20th, then it looks like they weren't able to get everybody. And if things don't happen, well, then they were pretty good at getting things to not happen. But the logic should be clear to you, unambiguously clear to you at this point, that no other dynamic could be going on. The U.S. enemies know it's now or never. This is the best opportunity they're going to get. If they wait a month, it's going to be worse for them, so they're going to try it now. All right, so now I'm going to be talking about my age and health. And again, let me just check the chat to make sure everything looks okay. Yeah, it looks okay. So now the real question is, again, why talk about the age and health? Look, if war does break out, if you get internal attacks within the United States starting tomorrow, I'm not going to be able to talk about stuff like that. And people have been pestering me with emails and on our forums asking, when am I going to be sort of specific about all this stuff with regard to my age and health? And I've been giving a lot of background, the extraterrestrial contacts that I have, and so on. So I have to just sort of get that out, clear that stuff out, so people will stop sort of wondering about what's going on. So I have told you that I have been reducing my aging rate, and I've given you the extraterrestrial reason for that. And it's interesting because I'm not going to go into a lot of the background I've given before, but just to summarize, I've been working with the extraterrestrials that we work with, the good guys, since I was a kid. And I think most of you know that when I was a child, I had two, they were gray extraterrestrials, these particular ones. They had two on my right and two on my left of my bed every single night when I was sleeping. They never bothered me. They were just there. I always wondered what they were. And this is not stuff I remembered in dreams or anything like that. They were just two on the right and two on the left. And they told me that, don't tell my mother about it because she would be concerned and things like that. So I never told anybody. And this is way before Whitley Strieber wrote Communion and people were talking about the Greys. I mean, these are just the two guys on my right, two guys on my left. They were friends. They were friendly, and they protected me. And given what I'm doing now with the great battle between the good ETs and the bad ETs, I would not have survived had I not been protected in some way. So that was what happened when I was a kid. And I've been sort of interacting on and off on a somewhat regular basis my whole life. And most of you know I have a child. I have a daughter. She's big now. She's like Aziz's age. And she's on the ships, and I go and visit her. And she has part of my genes, apparently. And she's a hybrid, and she's the one I mostly interact with when I have to go to the ships. And the reason is, every time I go, I get a ton of information. I have to remember everything. I think they wanted someone who was genetically as compatible as possible, telepathically completely fluent, but also genetically compatible, so that all the information could get in when I'm there, and then so when I come back, I'd remember everything and get it all done. Farsight's really big now, and we're really complicated, and I would be glad if you all said I was simply a genius to be able to put it all together. But to be quite honest, I just did what I was told. So, and it works. It's worked out very good. They've given me a lot of assistance in terms of, guidance. A lot of it I sort of figured out, but a lot of the stuff they sort of said, why don't you try this? So like that. And with regard to my health, yes, whenever I got sick, I have always said, hey, can I get a little help down here? And they always said no. They knew that I had to live longer because I'm 72 now, and I would be, just retired and that'd be the end of it. And that wouldn't be enough time. So they knew I had to live sort of almost, I'm not going to live as long as a normal ET in the ships. They very typically last 250 years, but in a single body, and then they can switch bodies and so on. So, but I had to last at least 120. So my aging rate had to slow down. So I was told how I could, I was nudged in the direction of knowing how I could slow the aging rate down. And I knew I was disciplined enough, and I knew I had to be disciplined enough to actually do it. So what I did was caloric restriction, which is the only thing that absolutely seriously works. There's a lot, and I don't do any products or anything like that. So caloric restriction, severe caloric restriction, combined with super supplementation. Now, I have to say this at the outset, so please listen to this. I don't want anybody trying what I'm doing. I am not recommending what I'm doing to absolutely anybody. I'm just being open with you with what I do, and I was given a lot of help in terms of doing this stuff. They absolutely insist that I have to go to a doctor once a year to get all of my blood work checked. I mean, I get everything checked. And if the doctor refuses and won't get something checked, I have to go out and I have to, pay for a lab outside to get it all checked. Everything has to be checked, every level. I remember I used to talk about this a little bit in the past, and then I used to get people in the forums actually or somewhere sort of saying, oh, I do this type of thing too. I've always done vitamins and supplements and stuff like that. And the person would be 300 pounds and taking maybe one vitamin and the rest of these and a lot of crazy supplements. And I just look at that and I say, God, there's easier ways to kill yourself. I mean, so you can really get yourself messed up if you just do your own thing. So I really recommend that people, if they want to take their health seriously, they have to do it in collaboration with a competent doctor or set of doctors. I don't recommend anybody just go off and do things by themselves. So I have everything I've done, and I've had everything checked. I don't say, doctors are bad. They just don't know squat, and I know how to do things. I don't trust doctors. No. That's not me. I trust doctors. I actually get their opinions and I seek them out. And if one doctor doesn't give me enough information, I get more information from another doctor. So, all right. So the diet that I have is vegetarian. Now, when I travel in Africa, which is quite often, I love traveling in Africa, I have to eat fish and chicken because otherwise I wouldn't survive, because I travel a lot in Africa, and it's hard for me to get protein sources or anything that I can eat in order to keep me alive. I do have special places that I know the cooks, and I know the restaurants, and I know the hotels, and I ask for them to fix me special meals that have beans and rice and vegetables and so on like that, and they do that for me. And I give a tip and so on like that, but they do that for me. But a lot of times I can't do that. I can't talk to the cook and get to know the cook, and so I have to eat chicken and fish to do that. But under no circumstances do I eat a mammal. I do not eat any mammals, period. And there's a good reason for that. Both normal health reasons in terms of the fat content and things like that, but also I just don't trust eating mammals. It's just not a good thing as far as I am concerned personally. And I have to be very careful because I don't want to get in any type of a suit situation. But mammals deal with things like prions differently than chicken and fish. For example, prions, which are the cause of various dementia issues, problems with thinking, cognitive thinking, and so on. If you're going to live to 120 years old, you have to be concerned about that. And prions are different. The folding issues with how the neurons actually work inside the brain when prions are there, that stuff comes from mammals. It doesn't come from fish and chicken. So I just simply avoid that, and I don't trust any mammal source anyway. For example, when you have a hamburger, the meat is actually taken from the bones using a machine called a renderer, and the renderers actually get more meat they make more money. The companies make more money if they can get more meat off the bones. Well, that inevitably sort of means that a lot of the bones and nerve stuff actually sometimes gets ground up as well as they're doing that. And I just don't trust it personally, but that's just my personal opinion. And you could say I'm totally, wrong about that. But there are essentially no prions in chicken and fish. But in the United States, I don't even eat that. In the United States, I eat bean dishes, dal, which is mung beans, and things like that. Everything I eat is organic. You're not going to die if you eat an inorganic meal today, but the body can only take so many insults before these little pesticides and other things that are in the food eventually sort of nick away at you, and eventually you get cancer. So I just don't eat anything that's not, if it's not organic, I don't buy it, period. And I eat vegetables and vegetarian meals, and and in terms of protein sources, I get plenty of good protein with beans and nutritional yeast, organic nutritional yeast. Actually, organic nutritional yeast is the same cost as regular nutritional yeast. I don't get fortified nutritional yeast because it has a lot of niacin, and I take supplements so it can give me, you can get a reaction from all that niacin. So I get just unfortified nutritional yeast, gives me a lot of extra protein and so on. I have almost no fat in my diet. You get a little fat anyway because of almonds. I love almond butter, for example, but not the almond butter that you know. So I get organic almond butter, for example, and I get the fat out of it. So I pour off the fat on the top, and then I wrap whatever's left. I always get organic apple butter that separates. So I pour the fat off the top, and then I take whatever's left and I wrap it in cheesecloth, and then I put a heavy weight on it, and I push out as much fat as possible. So the organic butter that I eat is not butter; it's solid like a rock, and you can crumble it on top of things, so it has much fewer calories. So I get just a little bit of fat in that and things like that. So all right. So let me talk about the vitamins I take in order to compensate, because I have 2 meals. I have an organic breakfast that usually is cereal, and in the morning with organic fruit. I never have any sugar ever added to my diet. I never take like a spoon of sugar or anything. It doesn't exist. And then I take I have a dinner that has low calories, but I have that at night. That's it. I don't even remember what a pizza tastes like. I don't remember what a cookie tastes like or a cake. So it's severe caloric restriction. And what it essentially does is it burns the body at an extremely low rate. So it doesn't burn. You get a temperature, you get heat. Your body is warm because of sugars that are burning with oxygen. It's like a furnace. And if you burn less fuel in the body, it burns up more slowly. But you'll die of malnutrition if that's all you do. So you have to super supplement or you're going to die. And so I have to super supplement. And now what I do in terms of supplementation, I'm going to go through right now so you can actually see it. And then I'm going to talk about my hair, because everyone's always asking about my hair, okay? And I'm going to talk to you about my skin, stuff like that. But first, let's go through supplementation. And again, I have to do this in order to, if I didn't do this, I'd be retired right now and I wouldn't be fighting this war, and this whole thing with Farsight would go away. And I can't stop at 72. I can stop at 122, but I can't stop at 72. So this has to be done in order for me to do my work. And of course, the ETs know that. And it was a big investment for them to get me here. They couldn't fly somebody in and give them a fake passport and social security number and say, do your job. I had to be born as a human into a human body with a human mother, go through the human educational system, the whole 9 yards. And I had to do all that without running into the problems of dying at 70 or so on. All right, so that's why this thing had to happen. So I knew this was coming for a very long time. Oh, something really interesting. Somebody in our forum said, oh, Courtney, what do you mean? This information about caloric restriction, that was known so long ago. And he listed like 10 different publications before, like from published going back to the, like 1950s or something going on. And I said, thank you. Okay, that's great. I started doing it when I was at UCLA, and the guy who was the doctor that was pioneering caloric restriction as a means of longevity with regard to studies with rats and snakes and spiders was Roy Walford. And he was a professor of medicine at UCLA. He was just a couple buildings down from where I was. And I started doing it sort of then. And I was doing it totally based on the lower animal studies that came in with regard to spiders, snakes, rats, things like that. I did it a little differently than he did. He was also trying to do it as well, and I didn't do it the way he did. He was a little too severe with himself. Yeah, you have to have a little bit of a cushion. The body's not like a piece of metal. So if you cut off too much, the body starts eating itself. So you have to be sort of reasonable with this. Okay, so let's go through. First, for my omega-3. I always take an omega-3 supplement, and this is the actual one I take, okay? This is a vegetarian omega-3. It's not coming from fish. It's coming from algae, and it's made by Sports Research, omega-3, and I take 2 of those, 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening, okay? All right. I take a calcium and magnesium supplement as well. This is the exact one I take. It's made by Solgar, and it's a calcium and magnesium, and it's essentially, I take 2 of those, so I take 1 in the morning and 1 in the evening, and these are caps or something. Okay. All right. And then I take a vitamin C. Now, my vitamin C, I take a gram in the morning and a gram in the evening. Unfortunately, I don't have the actual bottle that it comes in because it's too big. But these are vitamin C capsules, and I take 1,000 milligrams in the morning and 1,000 milligrams at night. And vitamin C doesn't last in the body very long, so I bookend the day by sort of having it in the morning and having it in the evening, and so on. Then I take vitamin D3, and I take 2 of these. And this is 1,000 milligrams. 1,000 IUs. So I take 2,000 IUs. Now, you have to be careful with D3, vitamin D3. I mean, it's if you take more than 4,000, I understand, and I'm not a doctor, so don't take my word for it, but my understanding is if you take more than 4,000 IU, you can run into problems with the kidney. Now, that's what killed Jim Marrs, apparently. That's what someone who worked with Jim Marrs told me that he told him. He was just taking way too much vitamin D3, and it affected his kidneys and so on. So 2,000 IUs, I've been told, is not bad. And my doctor recently, like 2 months ago, told me that the doctors don't really know what the appropriate level of vitamin D3 should be. They used to recommend sort of a lower level than this, but now they really don't know the proper amount. So he recommended that the amount that I'm taking is safe, which was 2,000 IUs. 2 of these little things. And this is the brand here I'm taking. This is a Pure Essential. I get it on Amazon. Oh, God. Okay. In addition, I take zinc. And so I take one of these zincs every day, okay? And the zinc that I take, I use the Pure, P-U-R-E encapsulations, and they have 180 capsules in here, and how much zinc do they have in these things? 30 milligrams. You have to be careful with zinc also because they have zinc gluconate that they sell, but zinc gluconate is not absorbed very well in the body. So I don't use zinc gluconate. I use zinc picolinate. Zinc picolinate, it's the most highly absorbable amount. So with zinc glutenate, what they do is, with other formulations of zinc, they add more zinc than you actually need because so much of it is not absorbed. But with zinc picolinate, it is absorbed. So I take 30 milligrams of that. Again, I am not recommending anybody do what I do. I'm just telling you what I do. And every once in a while, like every other day, I take some chelated iron. I use Solgar chelated iron, and that's because I really have no iron source in my diet. So I take that, and the amount of iron in one tablet is 25 milligrams of chelated iron, and that's what I take. Again, I'm not recommending anyone do what I do. This is just what I do. Now, I don't have the actual bottle for the multiple that I take, which is Solgar's Vegetarian Multiple VM-75. That's the one I take. I carry it around on a little thing like this because it's easy to take when I'm camping and going surfing and stuff like that. And then I take a vitamin B12. Because I'm vegetarian, I need to take a vitamin B12, and that's it's one that you put under the tongue and it dissolves and so on. And again, that's the end of my supplements that I take. I don't take anything else. I take absolutely no drugs of any type whatsoever. I have no blood pressure problems. I don't have any problems for any drugs, but I do take those supplements, and I have it checked. The doctor knows every single supplement that I take, and I go through the Emory Healthcare Service, which is a really prestigious service, and they're really great healthcare place. And it's one of the largest, apparently, probably in the country. And they have a big file on me, and they test everything. They look at those supplements, and they go through everything, and they do the blood work on everything to see if I have all the right levels, and if anything's too low, they boost it. For example, I was taking 1,000 milligrams of vitamin D3, not milligrams, it's IUs. I was taking 1,000 IUs of vitamin D3 for a while, and they did a test on my vitamin D, and it was a little on the low side, so I boosted it up to, with the doctor's permission, I boosted it up to 2,000 IUs of vitamin D3. So anyway, you can see that I had to do that. Okay, that's the good news. It does work in slowing the aging rate down so that I can live a long time. The bad news is it makes you look like hell. I mean, it makes you look terrible. I mean, terrible. For years, I looked like a famine victim that came out of a prison in the middle of the desert or something. I just looked awful. All of the fat in the skin gets drained. In the face, it drains first. And so it just looks terrible. So I wanted to show you a screen of what I used to look like. Now, this is a screen where I actually have hair, and I'm going to talk about the hair in a second. But first, I want to actually show you what I used to look like so you don't have to go through past videos to try to find it. Okay. All right, so this is me beforehand, okay? So you can see how thin I look in terms of the face. I mean, it really looked, I was trying the very best I could at the time, but I really looked very thin and very gaunt. Okay. So anyway, you could see how thin I was. Okay, so that's what happens when someone does this caloric restriction. And Roy Walford was even worse. I mean, Roy Walford, the professor of medicine at UCLA, he was like, he was really squished. Anyway, all the fat drains out and you just look like hell. And so I didn't want to do that. And there was a problem with the aging rate as well, because if you wake up every single morning and you look at the mirror in the bathroom and you look like that, what you're telling yourself when you look like that is, oh gosh, I look like I'm going to die tomorrow. It just looks terrible. And psychologically, mentally, it just is, that can kill you just by itself. So you have to have a good way of looking at things. You have to look at yourself and be happy with what you're seeing. So at that point, plastic surgery was absolutely necessary. So I've talked to my plastic surgeon. I've had two plastic surgeons, and they're married. And one is Mr. Eves, Dr. Eves actually, and he's married to Dr. Mioto, and they work out of ME Plastic Surgery. They were part of the Emory Healthcare System for the longest while, and now they work in cooperation with the Emory Healthcare System, now on the same building and so on. And Dr. Mioto, she's originally from Brazil, but she's fully certified. She's sort of famous. She gives lectures and she gets awards and all types of things. Anyway, she's really good. And the big thing I had with plastic surgery is called fat grafting. Now, I didn't have much fat on me to begin with, But with fat grafting, you have to find some fat. Actually, let me tell you the story of Dr. Eves, the guy. I walked in his office and I said, look, Dr. Eves, this is what I do. I do this caloric restriction. I've got this life mission. I just can't look like this anymore, but you gotta fix this. And but this is it, and it's working in terms of my medical stuff, but it just makes me look like hell. What can you do? He actually went out and he got my file. It was a big fat file because I'm in the Emory healthcare system. He looked through the whole thing and he said, he comes back in the office and says, okay, Courtney, I've seen your file. I understand what you're doing. It does look like it's working, but you're asking a lot. He said, most people who come to us with more to work with, you're like, don't have anything to work with. It's like skin and bones. So this is not going to be a one-shot deal. We're going to be able to, well, do it, but you have to understand you're going to have to be a partnership with us as we slowly work on this. And I said, whatever it takes, just do it. I can't look like this anymore. And so I started. And I had the big thing that I had is called fat grafting. Fat grafting is where they take fat from other parts of the body and they pump it into the face, literally pumping it into the face. And I didn't have much fat to begin with, but they had some. I had some fat on the top of my thighs, so that was good. They didn't need much, just like a few ounces, but they had some fat on the top of my thighs. And there was some fat right on the surface of my belly, so they found that. And then, so I had the fat grafting done 3 times. And then they found some fat right above my knees. I was stark naked, and they were literally looking over my entire body where I might have a little bit of fat that they could take away. Okay. So they used liposuction to suck out the fat in those spots, and they pumped it into the face 3 times. And what it was is everything they pump in, 50% of it goes away. It gets shrunk. It's reabsorbed by the body, and you get 50. So what happens is immediately after, my face looked like a balloon. It was full. It was full. And I said, oh my gosh, I'm destroyed now. But Aziz, my son, he said, no, Dad, this is going to look okay. Trust me. And so sure enough, a month or so later, it shrunk down. And after 3 months, it was basically settled. But I lost 50%, and I needed it again. So it was pump, shrink, pump, shrink, pump, shrink. Over like a 2-3 year period, it was pumping, shrinking, until I got to where I am now. And finally they said, okay, this is good. Then, in fact, there was a little bit too much on one side. And then Dr. Mioto did 2 of the fat graftings for me. And Dr. Eves, he did the first fat grafting. And then on the side, it was just a little bit too much here. It actually had too much on the side. So Dr. Mioto used some type of ultrasound thing, soft wave or something, and she burned some of the underneath the skin. She burned some of the fat away. It killed some of the fat cells like inside, so that it sort of leveled it out, so it was more chiseled. Anyway, you can see this was a lot of work, and it was not cheap. It was expensive, and so I had to have that done, and so that I would look the way I look today. So if I'm doing the caloric restriction, it looks like hell, but it's absolutely mandatory to do the cosmetic surgery afterwards, because the extending the lifespan with caloric restriction, I don't think it would even work if you look like hell every time you wake up in the morning and you go in front of the mirror. You have to look and feel good at the same time that your body is burning the calories slowly and you're extending your life. So it was sort of that. All right, now let's talk about hair, because a lot of the people, they often comment about my hair, because in the old days my hair looked sort of bald. In my last spotlight, I actually went through my aging rate, and I used the total testosterone level as a proxy for how old my biological age is. And my total testosterone level was 787, which is high for someone between 20, say, and 40. So that's high for that. And, I was 72, so that's like way higher, because the total testosterone level, absolutely, once you get past 40 years old, it drops by about 1% every year in a really easily measured way. permanently. So people that are 72 years old would typically have a testosterone level of like 300, 500, 400, something like that. But 787, which is about 800, that was 4 standard deviations away from the mean. And the probability of that happening by chance is like 0.00036 or something. All right. So somebody in our forums then said, and just to be clear, we do read the forums, not just me, but the other viewers, said, okay, Courtney wasn't talking what he knew, but he didn't know anything about anything. He should have been looking at his free testosterone level, because that's what really matters in terms of how much testosterone you have. And I said, what can I do? Everyone's coming in as trying to be an expert. Okay. You have so much testosterone that's made by the testicles and so on like that for men. The total testosterone level can be used as a proxy for age because it so clearly drops as people get older biologically. Free testosterone has nothing to do with that. Free testosterone is the amount of testosterone that's actually available to use in the body, not how much is being made. And that is because there are hormones that are made in the body that absorb or neutralize a lot of the testosterone, so not all of it is free to be able to be used. But that has nothing to do with aging. So the free testosterone is the amount that can be used to make you feel powerful, hard, make you to be able to have sex and be interested in sex and have physical strength and stamina and stuff like that. That's the free testosterone level, but it has nothing to do with aging. My free testosterone level is fine, but the issue is the only thing I needed to present in that presentation was a total testosterone level, because that's what's used for marking an aging process. And some other people said, no, there's other things you can do as well, test this, test that. Testosterone is really easy, cheap, you can measure it, and it's such a nice, clear marker for biological aging, and the statistics on it is really well documented. So anyway, so that's why I reported the total testosterone level from the aging perspective. However, this brings up the topic of age. Because I have a high testosterone level, and part of that is because I don't eat things that could interfere with the testosterone. I don't eat dairy products. I don't eat for example, with dairy products, that wouldn't affect the total testosterone level, but it would affect the free testosterone level, because dairy milk comes from a lactating female, so a cow, and cows are lactating. That's how come they have milk. Now, they have estrogen in the milk. Now, in the old days, I used to have non-fat yogurt. And estrogen is fat soluble, so it's contained mostly in the fat. So in the old days when I did eat milk, dairy things, it was always non-fat. And so I didn't get as much estrogen as, I could have if I had ate like 2% or full fat milk or dairy. So full fat milk or dairy, or even 2% low fat, that has a ton of estrogen in it. I mean, a ton of estrogen. That's the primary source of estrogen for people. And the other source of estrogen, or estrogen-like things, is phthalates, which is often found in plastics. And there's a lot of estrogen-resulting type of stuff, mimicking estrogen type of stuff, if you cook in plastics or something. So I don't cook in any type of plastics or anything. I don't eat out of plastics. But that's all relating to the free testosterone level. In terms of the total testosterone level, mostly that's something that results from the aging process by itself. Okay, but if you have a high testosterone level, you lose your hair at the top of your head. That's called male pattern baldness. And some people, not many, but some people are genetically predispositioned to not have that happen. But most men start losing their hair on the top of their head. And it starts around 35. Sometimes it starts around 20. A lot of the men a lot of my students in college have male pattern balding starting in the 20s. But by 30 it starts. By the time it's 40, it's there. And there's nothing you can do about it, because the the hair that's on the top of the head, for some reason, it's different from the hair on the side of the heads. It gets killed in the presence of testosterone. Testosterone kills the hair cells on the top. Not all of them, but most of them. So you have this male pattern baldness that happens. Now, there's only two ways to address this, to my knowledge, that work fairly well. And the first is a hair transplant, and I did not do that, and I'll tell you why. But a hair transplant is when they take some hair cells, a strip of hair cells from like the back of the head, because those cells are not affected by the testosterone, and they implant them like planting trees on the top of the head. And that works, but it looks crappy. And in order for it to actually, because it's like planting trees of a forest, but you're not having all the other stuff that's in a forest, like the bushes and the grasses and stuff like that. So it just looks like these spikes of hair coming out. It looks very unnatural. So in order for the hair grafting or hair transplanting to work, you have to take two drugs. Now, one is called minoxidil, which is popularly sold as Rogaine, and the other is finasteride, which is Propecia. Now, I won't go into minoxidil, which is Rogaine, but I don't take any drugs, and I didn't want to do that. But finasteride shuts the testosterone level down. It really stunts the testosterone level down, like the total testosterone level down. And so that's Propecia, and it does work. What happens is it stops the attack on the small hairs that are on the top of the head. Remember, you're transplanting the big ones, but the small hairs have to grow. So the Propecia, or finasteride, that stops the testosterone so the little hairs can grow. Trouble is, it shuts down testosterone production, and I don't want that. I like my testosterone. And a good proportion of people who have taken it have self-reported that it reduces their sex drive a lot. There was this one guy I know, he had gorgeous hair. I mean, he had a hair transplant because he was really desperate to attract women because he didn't like the male pattern baldness. And he just looked terrible, and he looked bald on the top. He had hair on the sides. Anyway, he had a hair transplant, and it was tremendously successful. And he took finasteride, which is Propecia. He took it, and then the little hairs started to grow all over the place, and he looked beautiful. I mean, it was just, he had his full head of hair. He looked gorgeous. And so he was able to attract women. And then he said, but now he says he feels disgusted when he's in bed with a naked lady. Like, ew. So heavens, he got the hair transplant to attract ladies, and then when he got and then it worked, the ladies wanted to go to bed with him. And then when he got into the bed with the naked ladies, he felt disgusted by being next to a naked lady. And he said, what did it do? He lost his sex drive. And apparently like 18% of guys have that problem with finasteride. So, and there are reports, a lot of them, that say if you stop taking it, it doesn't come back. The testosterone doesn't like restart. It's a permanent type of shutting it down. Now, I'm not a doctor, so I'm not swearing to any of this stuff, but this is what I've read, and this is what I've heard, and so that was enough to scare me, and I said, I'm not going to get a hair transplant. So since I couldn't do the finasteride and the minoxidil, I couldn't do that. I had to come up with an alternative solution. So I did Hollywood stuff. I would say absolutely 100% of every male that you see that's above 40 years old in Hollywood, all of your favorite, stars that you have a heartthrob for or anything like that, they all have hair replacement systems. Some people would call them wigs or toupees, but they're complicated, so they don't call them that. They're hair replacement systems, every single one of them. So what happens in the morning, every morning, I shave the top of my head so that it's smooth, just the top. The hair on the sides is plenty, just like normal. But I shave it so it's smooth, and then I tape on a hair system, and we don't call it a toupee anymore, but toupees are things you can take off and throw them around and stuff like that. You can either get them attached by glue, in which case they last for about 6 weeks, or you can put a tape. And I use a tape because I didn't like the idea of the toxins in the glue right next to my brain. So I use the tape. Now the tape can last, they have different quality tapes. It can last a long time. I can swim with it. It's just so and I use expensive hair systems. I buy them and they cost a lot. But I get good ones, and it can cost me like $800 to get one done, and so on like that, or sometimes a little more, a little less, but and that puts hair on the top of the head, and I can't pull it off or anything like that. I can swim with it and everything like that, but that's normal for anyone over. If you pick your Hollywood star that you like, and you can't see it no matter what, even if I'm swimming or anything like that. Even if a girl is putting her hands through my head, they can't feel it unless they touch right on the edge and they really are very careful about it. And then they can sort of detect that maybe there's a little bit of an edge or something there, but they can't tell otherwise. And you can have it so that it stays for like, if you use a glue, it can stay for, I've heard people up to 2 months. 6 weeks is more normal. But then you have to throw the system away, because taking it off is a mess. And I didn't like to do that. So I use tape because it's healthier for the scalp and so on like that. And anyway, so that's what I do. And that's what everybody in Hollywood or Bollywood, they all do that as long as they're over 40 years old. They have something. Sometimes they use systems that have just a front or little parts or something, but they always have some addition that they add to it. Otherwise, I would look like a monk, like Friar Tuck. The fat grafting wouldn't do anything for something like that, so I have to have something like that. So that's how come the hair looks the way it is. And if you look at some of the old videos that I have, like teaching Aziz, you'll see the hair it's just not there. It's there, but it's like really crappy looking. So it's better that I just, whatever's surviving up there, I just shave it off and just put something on top. And then, then I look the way I do. So that's how come I look the way I do. And that makes me compatible with the way the body is aging. So when so anyway, that's a total thing of what I do. So I had to go through that. Now again, I'm not making advice for anybody. It's just that there's so many people talking about it. And I also had the issue, I didn't want a situation where people were saying that I'm not like totally earth human or anything like that. If once it gets to be like I'm 80 and I still look the same and I'm acting the same, and then I'm 90 and I'm looking the same and acting I didn't want to get a situation like when I'm 100. I didn't want people to say, oh, I'm actually someone from the ships and I should be kidnapped or killed or something like that. So I didn't want that. So I have to give the reasons. And let me tell you the honest truth. When you're on the ships, and I've been on the ships a lot, they've got tech that can do anything. Trust me, they have tech that can do anything. There's nothing that can be invented that hasn't been invented. And you'd be really stupid if you thought I didn't ask for it. I said, can I have a little bit of that? And they said, no, I had to deal with whatever. I had to do it the strictly human way. So I was able, they helped me, figure out what to do. Because they knew I had to live to 120 minimum. So they helped me sort of figure this out to do what I have to do, but I couldn't use any ET tech to do it. And so now I've explained what I do, and this is sort of a mundane thing. There was nearly no rush that I had to tell people all of this, except because of the war that is most likely to happen tomorrow. That's the whole thing. If it doesn't happen and 6 months goes down and there's no type of war or anything happening, okay, then basically it looks like my side lost. And then, because we're expecting these things to actually happen, because we're expecting the other side to fight back and so on, and then to come to humanity's rescue. And if that doesn't happen, well then, I guess we go away. But I think we're going to be okay with this, and I'm pretty sure that you're going to get disclosure. Disclosure is all we're looking for. We're just all looking for complete, total disclosure. And that's what Farsight is all about. So the whole Farsight library, farsightprime.com, was built with help from the ETs to give you a real understanding of what's really been going on in humanity for thousands of years, actually going all the way back to the dinosaurs. It's a very complicated history, but what you learn in school, I guarantee you, is total garbage. So the Farsight library is what's that's the answer to sort of fill in the gaps. So if you have not yet subscribed to farsightprime.com, you really need to do that, because you're not going to get the information anywhere else. And we had to do it using that remote viewing process to convince you also that you're not just a physical body, that the physical body is just a piece of biological stuff, and that's not who you are. And humans have to be convinced of that, as crazy as that sounds, but that's the way we are. That's where we are today. But again, it's an absolute certainty that the highest probability of war starting, attacks starting, is tomorrow or this week. And it's a decreasing probability the farther you go down, because the farther you go down, the more the immigration raids are going to happen. They're going to be chasing after the terrorists, people they're going to try to get out. And the people who are positioned, the enemies of the United States, they're going to, if they don't do it when they have the chance, they're not going to have a chance to do it. So the highest probability is sooner rather than later, but probably not starting until tomorrow, which would be the 20th of January. Anyway, but we'll have to wait to see what happens. If it doesn't happen, then that would mean that the U.S. intelligence services plus the Secret Service was able to stop it. But for certain, the enemies are here, and the enemies would want to do it. So if it doesn't happen, then the U.S. intelligence services and Secret Service were amazing in being able to stop it. They're really good, but you're asking a lot, because you've had 4 years of you've had 4 years of real problematic stuff happening, with the borders being open and people coming in. So for it to be stopped completely by the U.S. intelligence services and Secret Service, you're asking a lot of them to stop it, given the open borders policy and the ability of drug traffickers to drive things all over the place, and for weapons to be transported all over the place for the same reason. You're asking a lot for the intelligence services, no matter how good they are, to suddenly fix all that in a couple weeks before the inauguration. So we'll see. We'll see how good they've been working at it, see how well this is going. But anyway, that's it. And so the reason I talked about my health and age today rather than any other day is because if the war does start, if, it's a probability statement, not a certain thing, but if the war does start like next week, then I would definitely not have any other chance to talk about it like for years, because there'll be other stuff we're going to be talking about, disclosure stuff, war stuff, everything like that, and there just won't be a way to raise it. But anyway, I hope this sort of satisfies the urge that people have had to sort of want to know about what I do. I don't use any alien tech, okay? So anyway, but that's it. And again, last thing, I don't recommend what I do in terms of health and aging for anybody else, because you can really get yourself in trouble if you don't do it right. And I'm a scientist. I knew what I was doing. I knew what I was going into. I knew the research that had been done. And following the adamant advice of the ETs, I did it under the supervision of a doctor, actually more than one doctor, lots of doctors. And so I had everything checked all the time, and I still do. So it was a lot of work to actually do this. And so anyway, so I don't recommend anyone do it on their own or follow my advice. I'm just explaining what I do. All right, everybody. So I will see you all next week, next Sunday, for the next Farsight Spotlight. I don't know what we're going to be talking about. Depends on what happens tomorrow and the rest of the week. So, but we'll be talking about something major. I guarantee that next Sunday. See you next Sunday. Okay, everybody?